These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. This episode of the Six Ranch Podcast is brought to you by Defend Security Cameras. How big is the challenge for you now of explaining what an African hunting experience is like to Western hunters who might not have ever even had it on their radar?
Yeah, I mean, the way I would frame that, James, is this is going to sound a little corny, man, but every day since I came back from Africa, I've thought about it, if that makes any sense. Like, I think about it every day. And I don't think that's just the experience that I had. There were some unique things probably about my experience, but I don't think it's very different than anybody's first hunt in Africa. South Africa, a lot of people go there. But I think it's the realization that there's so much more there. You're hunting with guys, like I hunted with a PH who'd spent a lot of time in Mozambique, a lot of time in Tanzania. I actually had a conversation with a guy that's going to be on my podcast here in the future about his time in Tanzania. And it's not necessarily the adventure itself. It's realizing that I've been so North American obsessed. And then in the spearfishing world, I've traveled around a bit more, and you realize that like this Africa thing is just an extension of that. There's a million different, a guy could spend a lifetime there. That's basically what it comes down to,
Oh, you could spend a lifetime in one of those countries.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're all so very different from each other. What about the opportunity to get what is ostensibly for a lot of folks a lifetime of hunting experience in a couple weeks?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because I've thought about this a lot too, James. I think I actually haven't done like the numbers, but I for sure am going to have to open up like a GoFundMe for taxidermy after doing it, because it's amazing how many animals you can hunt / kill when you're there, and then you compress. The hunting's different. I'll acknowledge that the hunting is different in a lot of ways, but there's still a bunch of overlap that it may take you 20, 30 years to get the experience of a 10-day hunt in South Africa in terms of stocks and that sort of thing. And that was something that I was actually, I was conscientious about because I tend to be that way. There's certain things that I've wanted to dig into that the nature of North American hunting is even a guy who guides for a living. He's got 9 months between seasons, and so the ability to try to figure some things out, to even improve, is actually pretty damn difficult under those scenarios. When you're in South Africa, I had every day we did stocks. Every day, I think, it obviously ebbed and flowed, but it's, some days you might kill 2 or 3 animals. And so you can actually conscientiously look at how things are playing out. Like for me, I was shot angles, and I'll admit, like I shot animals at what would be viewed subpar angles on purpose. There's no way I could have done that in the US. So there's a lot of those things just from a practical standpoint that I could not do anywhere else.
So how did that accelerate your learning and understanding specifically of shot angles? Because that's something that I think is a major deficit for a lot of North American hunters, and largely due to a lack of opportunity and comparatively a lack of experience. Because most folks get to hunt 1 or 2 species and maybe not even every year. So when you get that opportunity that's imperfect, a lot of North American hunters are going to take that opportunity because they feel like they're not going to get another chance.
Right.
And they don't necessarily know what the outcome is because this might be the first time that they've ever been faced with that scenario. So what did you learn? You've got 20 acres and your security camera can see about 50 feet from your Wi-Fi router. Your gate, your barn, your equipment, All the places you actually need to monitor, they're exactly where your Wi-Fi doesn't reach. That's where defense security cameras make a lot of sense. They work on cellular, just like your phone. But here's what's clever. They've got an embedded SIM card that automatically connects to the best network in your area. Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. It finds whatever's strongest. No choosing providers, no contracts, no hassle. I'm using Defend cameras at my place. You mount it, open the Defend app on your phone, and you're done. 10 minutes. Clear footage, night vision, instant alerts, and here's something you need to know. Defend doesn't sell your data. Not to China, not to tech companies, not to anyone. They work for you, period. Defend your place.
Yeah, so I think it's a question of I think there's a lot in there, James. I actually think that is it's not just like the lack of just number of opportunities in North America. It's also like this feedback loop, right? So in North America, a lot of guys will kill an elk. I mean, this I shouldn't say a lot of guys. Like this has been my experience guiding in the mountains, for instance. Even though I might I might guide 8 elk hunts a year or something in, some of my busier years. But each time you harvest an animal, there is no feedback loop of like, hey, let's see what the broadhead did. Let's see what the bullet did. Let's see, what it actually looked like. I mean, there are guys out there that have killed 20 bull elk. And I would say, they may have not actually seen the inside of any of them because they're boneless quartering animals, that sort of thing. So Africa to me was conducive in that regard too, because I could go to the skinning shed and see these animals opened up, which was helpful. Now, in terms of what I learned, some of this may sound pretty obvious, but there's a difference in the rhetoric around it and the discussion of it. But I shot different types of bullets. Like I literally in a sense, I had my gun zeroed to multiple different bullets, and I would shoot the same species with, say, one far end of the spectrum, like a TSX or a TTSX, and then I'd shoot the exact same species, the exact same angle with a tipped Match King, and go see the difference. And when you go look at the difference, you realize, it's a lot different than just speculating what the differences are and the limitations, but actually seeing the limitations and knowing like, okay, I can shoot, like I know right now, James, where a match bullet will fail. Like I've seen it. I don't need to, and a lot of people in my experience will say it'll fail a lot quicker than it actually will. But I also that there's other people that'll say, oh, you could kill anything with them at any angle, depending on the size. Or like I saw it with zebras in South Africa. Like I know that if I needed to break the pelvic bone on a zebra that was wounded and running away, they won't work. You know what I mean? Like I know for a fact they won't work. I've shoved my hand into the wound channel and seen like where the bullet fragmented against the pelvic bone after, X amount of penetration. So that I guess that would be an example. Some people it's going to sound naive or like you could have read something. I don't think you really can, because you got to calibrate it to like reality, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And, what a what a tremendous opportunity to be able to discover that and do so in this way that has a lot of opportunity and a lower threshold of risk and consequence. When I go to a reloading manual and I look at what it says about match bullets, in all caps at the bottom, it says, this is not intended to be used for hunting.
Right.
I've seen match bullets be successful. I've seen match bullets fail in different scenarios. I look at it like trying to off-road in a Ferrari.
Sure.
A Ferrari is great at doing Ferrari things, but it's not great at off-roading. And that's sort of the difference that I'm trying to tease out between shooting something like paper or steel versus shooting something that is living and tough, and there are some, there are fewer variables that you can control.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and the thing is, James, is like I saw it on the other side too, and this is like reflecting on the Africa thing. We culled black wildebeest for a day, and we were above I want to say timberline. So funny I say that, but it's not timberline, but there's kind of like a vegetation line, at least in the area I was at, and then you're above that vegetation line. It's wide open, and you couldn't get close to them. I mean, they'd been culling a bunch of them, so they're not dumb, and so we were shooting. I mean, 250 to 450 yards, and there's a howling wind, and it's like you see the other end of the spectrum, and again, it's gonna say, well, you could have figured out that from reading. It's like it's hard to figure it out from reading, because the other side of that is I got a handful of copper reloaded bullets, I got a handful of high BC match bullets, and in that situation, I'm waiting for broadside shots. I would rather be shooting the match bullets because the wind made so much difference. You know what I mean, James? Like, when you really look at the numbers. So it's not, I guess for me, that was like another way to look at it. It's like, I kind of wanted the Ferrari. If I could choose my shots, we were going to have other shots, but I wanted to limit how much basically meat loss, right? Like we're broadside, like rib shooting them, or we're head shooting them. I don't want to, I don't want to hit shoulders. I don't want to hit hips. I don't want to hit guts. And the wind actually matters. Like it was a use case that made sense,
What caliber were you shooting?
I was shooting almost solely on Plains Game 6.5 PRC.
And what was the BC and velocity difference between your copper ammo and your match ammo?
Yeah, so I'm not looking at it right now, but most the copper ammo is like high threes, maybe 0.4, and then some of those match bullets are like right at 0.7.
Okay. So fairly significant difference. And then what about velocity?
Yeah, I'd have to look at it, James. So
Were they similar at least?
yeah, so they're very so velocities were very similar. I want to say that the coppers were shooting like 100 feet per second higher. But the thing is that part of that is just because you can only reload X long copper bullet, so you have a weight differential, right?
Right.
Which, I mean, all that stuff. So yeah, it wasn't. I mean, given that, there's going to be a little bit of difference there.
Yeah. No, totally. No, I find it very interesting. I love the math side of ballistics. I absolutely love it. And especially when you're talking about things that are affecting your time of flight, which is what it all comes down to. It's like, how much time is that bullet going to be in the air affected by the wind, and how much is it going to drift as a product of that?
Well, and I could see that, you know what I mean, James? It was significant. I'm sure you've kind of like run the numbers in your mind. Like a bad wind call, we were shooting enough that I had bad wind calls, I had good wind calls, and this is like a funky kind of mountain wind type of scenario. I mean, there's a difference. I mean, it's different. I mean, there's quite a bit of difference. I mean, you're talking like at 450 yards, a bad wind call with one you might be off by 3 inches. With the other, you might be off by 8 or 9 inches.
What was your favorite animal to eat while you were there?
Man, I actually thought of the animals we ate. I'll be honest with you. I didn't find that they were hugely different in taste. More than anything, to me, they were different in texture, which is probably just like related to body size or whatever. But if I had to pick, it'd probably be like springbuck or impala. But I ate zebra. I liked it. I ate the majority of the other ones. I couldn't tell a huge difference. The other thing is all the food I had that was really good, which is kind of an interesting aspect to the whole trip too. So it's like it was cooked so well, I don't know that I could tell the difference. You know what I mean?
you get taken care of at a really high level when you're hunting in Africa, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, big time, right? And I had heard that before, but what I didn't understand, and this was a takeaway from the trip, not to take a very basic question, make it deep, James, but the income, like the labor disparity in terms of what labor costs there, like blew me away, right? So a lot of the little things, the skinners, the trackers, all the help. Everybody was so hardworking, and I got a feel for what they, it's just a big part of it is that their overhead is a lot less in the U.S., right? So they can have that type of hospitality, which is awesome. Which is awesome. And it's incredible, right? I think anybody that would deny that being a huge plus of Africa is probably full of baloney. But it did, particularly interacting with the skinners and the trackers and stuff. It it reiterated to me, but that this life is not fair, man. Like this, it like we won the lottery just by being Americans. I mean, those guys are, uh, you know, I mean, working as hard or as harder than anybody I know. But I mean, I'm specifically talking about the skinners and trackers, but and they're happy to do it because it's what they need to do. But it just made me. I thought that many times. I like looked at those guys. It's not like I didn't feel sorry for them. They were happy guys. I just was like, wow, this wealth disparity. It's it's a real. I mean, it's a hugely significant thing, and it's just luck.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's fascinating that happiness portion is also interesting to me because if I were to put myself in that situation where I was getting paid, 350 bucks a month or whatever, and having to work that hard, knowing what I know now from the way that I was brought up, even though comparatively I wasn't brought up with money and I worked really, really hard from a really young age. Comparatively, I think that would make me unhappy to make $300 a month and have to go through that much physical labor. But if you look at those folks, they seem very, very happy with their lives. And it also makes me question, like, who's better off, you know?
Yeah,
And if you really start to run it out, you're gonna run into some intersections where it's clear that having more money and having access to things like healthcare and cleaner water and these support systems that we have, that's an advantage, right?
yeah,
Undeniably, it's an advantage to be able to access these things via money and via just being American. But it brings up some interesting questions about happiness for
yeah.
me.
No, no, yeah, same deal. Because and the other thing is I guess I'd have to put this in the context that I interacted with the guys in the way that I would interact with them as a client, right? So I don't, I wasn't like I was, had deep conversations with them on things. I mean, most of them spoke pretty good English, and we did talk about life and family and that sort of stuff. But I would say that all the guys I hunted with always had a smile on their face, and I think I tend to think that sometimes there's like happiness found in simplicity. I don't mean that in like a derogatory way. It's just like, hey, today we're getting up and we're going to go hunting, just like we did the last 70 days. And then after we're done hunting, we're going to skin animals and we're going to do the thing. There's almost some value in just that's that's it. And the other thing is they're good at it, man. Like they're incredibly good at it. I think it's almost laughable because I think that I look at myself and over the years of hunting, I've built up, you build up a skill set, as a guy who does it for a living. But when you really interact with those guys, you realize like, oh man, they're at another level. And I even mean like very practical things. I mean, I've salted and turned tons of hides myself, probably 50, 60, I don't know, maybe 100. But these, like, I'm an amateur, like child level skinner or turner of ears and paws and that sort of thing relative to those guys. So it's a minor thing, but you're like, wow, these guys are good at what they're doing. So I don't know, but I think about it too, James, for sure. It's not all economic, but of course there are the things that are important, the health stuff, the fact that a lot of those guys are away from their families a lot, like all that stuff.
Well, and that comes back to what we originally talked about with just repetitions.
Yeah.
If you are skinning 3, 6 animals a day for most of the year, you're going to get more experience and more opportunity to gain skill than anybody in North America who's limited to doing it throughout even a guide who's working every day of every season.
Right.
Like, you're just not going to do it. Something I think that more and more North American hunters need to be paying attention to is the fact that there is a southern hemisphere on this planet.
Sure.
And if you are willing to get on an airplane and fly in the most convenient method of travel that has ever existed in history to that hemisphere, you can have 2 falls, right?
Yeah. Sure.
That is an incredible opportunity. And I see very few guides in North America who are going down and guiding in the southern hemisphere, but there's actually quite a few in the southern hemisphere who have figured it out and
Sure.
are coming up, and they're extending their guide season by double by doing that. And they're pretty handy guides.
Yeah. Like you mean specifically a lot of New Zealanders.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And yeah, I agree. I don't know, if I could go back 20 years, I think I'd probably consider that. You know what I mean? It's not fundamentally, it wouldn't work for me in my life right now, but I do know what you're saying. And it's funny, I'm sure it has to do with work permits and stuff too, but when I was spending time in British Columbia, tons of that going on.
Yeah.
Lots of Kiwi guys up there. So
Right. And that's, part of that British Commonwealth thing where it's
sure.
a little bit easier for them to manage that. My first trip to Africa was 12, 13 years ago, and I very legitimately considered staying.
Yeah.
And I think that I would have thrived there if I could have figured out how to do that and, split my seasons between the 2 continents. And
Yeah.
I think back on that often.
It's interesting. Let's be honest. The South Africa, my experience, it's the richest country in Africa, right? But it's still got problems. I mean, if you are inquisitive about things, that becomes pretty obvious, And my feeling, I'd love to hear your feeling because I can only talk about the context of my trip. I felt very safe the whole time. I wasn't worried about that. Of course, the way I would describe it, my experience with the authorities and stuff with firearms and all of that, there's an edge. There's an edge that I wouldn't. I don't know what I would describe it as, James. I would maybe it's from it's just from probably a ton of the history there. I don't know, but I felt that totally anecdotal. I only dealt with South African authorities like 3 or 4 times in the airports or whatever. But there's a feeling and there's a tension there, right? But it wouldn't deter me from going there again. But when I think about it in the context of living there or having a career there as a hunting guide, I find it's interesting, man, because I talk to those guys a lot. Like you only see a certain part of it as a client, but they live in a world where it is less safe for them. Just as like having a family and everything else. And I find it amazing how well the guys adapt to it. You know what I mean? Like there's certain security measures they take. There's all these things that, and that's for sure an experience I had just interacting with the guys and, that may have been a little unique, and meeting their wives and family and stuff. Maybe it's not unique at all, but that experience, it's like, oh yeah, you guys have these things that if I threw myself into that, it would take me time to adapt. I don't know if any of that makes sense.
No, it does. And I mean, that is in many ways the cultural history of a lot of the places in Africa that have been colonized, for hundreds of years, where there's been this tension and violence and clashing that has occurred. If I'm trying to think back, I believe most everyone I know within like the hunting space, at least, who lives in Johannesburg, has been stabbed or shot at some point,
Yeah.
right? Like there is this violence that has occurred there for a long time and continues to occur there. Johannesburg, I believe, is the millionaire capital of the world,
Yeah.
and there's a huge amount of wealth there. And then the disparity in wealth is amplified even furthermore by this really low wage that folks will work for there, and it's crazy. But you can, if you can afford a plane ticket to go to many African countries, it's the equivalent of being a billionaire
Yeah.
in the United States. Like there's just a tremendous disparity in wealth. Yeah, outside of that, like what was your cultural experience there?
Yeah, so I had originally my wife was going to come with me, and then due to some stuff and just going on in our personal life, that didn't happen. So I went just by myself, and so I just hunted every day. You know what I mean? I didn't see a lot. I didn't see a lot of the country. I went into a couple of the small towns, so I don't know outside of just the stuff, interacting with the guys that hunt in the hunting side of things. I didn't go do a lot, to be honest, James. Like there's on my next trip there, I think I would do a lot more of that. I did spend some time in Cape Town, which is like stunningly beautiful, and where I was at in it, I mean, I felt plenty safe and all of that. I do the one thing that popped up to me is like something that was a little bit recurring, and I think it's because the way my travel was, I stayed in Cape Town at a hotel. The firearm thing, it's not hard. I mean, taking guns there is not hard, but they got it pretty locked down. Like even hotels I stayed, like they had to take them from you. You couldn't have them in your room, those sort of things. So that was another thing. Again, it's not really. I'm not knocking South Africa. I mean, it's their country. Obviously, I understand why certain rules might have developed there for good, bad, or whatever. But it's something I take for granted as an American. Our gun rights are, I mean, yeah, I know they're under threat all the time, but they're the best. It's so easy. There is
Right.
nobody. This is not. It's not. You're not under scrutiny for it at all. There, it's a thing. So, but other than that, I didn't do a whole lot of tourism on that side of things.
Were you hunting in the Eastern Cape?
So I was about 3 hours outside of Port Elizabeth,
Okay. Yeah.
and it. Go ahead.
Similar zone to probably where I was the last time I went.
Okay. Yeah, it looks similar from the pictures. I was surprised how mountainous it was where I
Yeah.
specifically was. It was beautiful, and it was also very green. But I think that was just condition based. You know what I mean, James? They had a couple. I swear to you, it got greener every day I was there. Like it wasn't. I don't know if this makes any sense, and I'd love to hear an explanation. But it seemed like the landscape reacted to weather faster than ours. Like it would get. I mean, it rained the first day I was there and the day before, and I saw it like get greener every day in a substantial way. And then as the trip progressed, I actually saw it revert and start to dry out fairly quickly too. Might have just been that unique area or whatever, but I found that interesting.
Were you surprised to see a lot of the invasive plant species there?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. I mean, is acacia invasive?
I don't know. Where I was, there was a huge amount of cactus. So there was prickly
Oh, okay.
pear, there was cholla, a bunch of stuff like that, and that had come from Mexico.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah.
interesting, dude. I mean, I don't think that I'm assuming that the acacia is native. I just said that because I ended up with one of those thorns in my foot. But dude, it didn't. This area didn't have as much of that. What one thing I
Okay.
did, one thing that was on the, there's this thought process, right? When you're thinking about South Africa, that of course is like, a lot of what I would guess some people at least use as their excuse to go there, and that's the whole high fence thing. And so I was very conscientious of that when I was so the place that we were hunting was, I mean, you got to do like the unit swap or whatever in terms of hectares, acres, or whatever. But it was roughly like 26,000 acres, and it had a single fence. And so, but it's still high fenced, as are a lot of the places. But what was interesting to me, man, I've been in high fences before, but I can also tell range conditions. And I could not understand the density of game that was in there versus how good the range conditions were. So it's like
Mm.
endless browse, tons of grass. They did tell me that they were like, they were on the, they had taken a bunch of animals off the place in, a year ago or so. So this may be a reflection of that. But I was stunned, James. Like I've been to places in Texas that were big high fence places. That I had some clients that owned one, and you walk around, and if you're privy at all to like vegetation, you're like, oh well, this is like this is kind of a figment of imagination because there's no feed here. You know what I mean? Like there's no browse, there's no grass. Like clearly, they're the only way they're maintaining these populations of animals is by feeding them. I was surprised that I didn't see that in Africa. I don't know if you've had a thought on that when you were there.
I think that in South Africa, in particular, especially down in the Eastern Cape, they're very, very good at managing the landscape using wildlife to do so.
Yeah,
And I mean, they have awards for it. Like
yeah,
it's something that they're working on all the time and trying to get right and do well. And they're using wild game to take care of these places so that it can be generationally sustainable. And
yeah,
and hunting is the mechanism that they use to make it work, which is interesting, and it's got its similarities to the North American model for wildlife conservation, where we're using hunting to fund wildlife research, but that doesn't necessarily fund anything to do with habitat.
right.
And then when you have this South African model, it's more privatized, and they're definitely using the funds from hunting to manage habitat and manage wildlife and prop up the economy. It's a very effective model, and the closest thing that we have to it is Texas.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting though, James, because I had this. You have this debate, right? And I talked to so the PH that I hunted with, young guy. His name's Chris Yonker. If anybody wants to go on a hunt, I mean, they should hit up Chris. Like he's for sure. He's like in that phase, James, where he's like building his thing up, as a guide. And I feel like he's probably like way underrated right now. And he only hunts on the one place that I hunted on. Like if somebody wants to go do it, I can't imagine you'd have a bad experience with the guy. But I talked to
Yeah,
Chris.
let's plug the safari real quick while we're talking about it. How do people get a hold of him?
Yeah, so he works on Buffalo Boar Reserve, I think they call it. Tim Sundles, who owns Buffalo Boar Ammo, owns it. But Chris runs it. It's very small, so he only wants to. I think they can do between 2 and 4 hunters at a time. They actually have the capacity in like the facility to have much more, but I think that's just kind of how they want to keep it. And Chris told me they're trying to do like 10 to a dozen hunts there. And then Tim, who owns it, hunts quite a bit, just with friends. Um, it's a beautiful place, man. Like I can't imagine, and that's like part of my whole experience there, James. Like I try to I have to reflect on that. That was my experience. Like I knew Chris, I knew Tim. I was like in some ways hunting with buddies. You know what I mean? So that had its own kind of like twist on the trip, I would say. And so there's probably like little things about the commercial aspect of the business that I didn't get a real good feel for. But it was awesome place to hunt. Um, but what I was getting at with Chris, I discussed this with him quite a bit because he grew up hunting. What's wild to me, man, is that the wildlife is privatized there. There's no debating that. But what's interesting is to the general population, it's still fairly inexpensive. I don't know if you ran into this. Like, so have you talked to any of the guys there that hunt on their own?
A little bit, but I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah. So, and this is just from a few conversations. One with Chris, and then also with a guy who kind of helped me get through the gun process and that sort of thing. And then he also, like, he was the guy who drove me to where I was going to stay in Cape Town or whatever. Super nice guy. He hunted too, which was interesting, and they both told me the same thing. So there's kind of maybe parallel systems from my understanding. There's hunting for locals that is pay to play, just like hunting for non-locals. You know, me and you go there, but there's a different tier of maybe like animal quality and then service quality. Just so it's like at a different price point for locals, but it's super reasonable, like way more reasonable than I've ever heard in North America. You know what I mean, James? So
Can you give me an example?
yeah, I'm trying to think. Man, I don't want to like misquote anybody or one of these guys, but I want to say, for springbuck and that sort of thing, they were doing more, they like biltong hunting, and they were paying like a couple $100 or something. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Or, something reasonable from American standards. Impala for a couple $100, springbuck for a couple $100. Sorry if I'm much off, guys, but I think those sort of like meat hunts, there's an abundance of them that are available for less than $1,000. You know what I mean?
And then compare that to, say, non-resident hunting here in the United States. That's way cheaper than that. Way cheaper than that.
Oh, the tags.
Yeah.
The market for a cow hunt right now is cow elk hunts $3,000 in a lot of situations, or more. In a lot of situations, you got to pay the state $500 or $800 for a tag. So I'm not. I guess what I'm saying, James, is I'm not saying that one system is better than the other, but I'm saying that if we discount that system as like totally trash and anti the North American model, we have to acknowledge that it's providing a pile of hunting opportunity at a fairly low cost. It's not like the local population. Yes, you have to. It is pay to play, but it is actually providing a lot of hunting opportunity to the resident. And I have to say that this is just my experience talking to a few people about it, but I found it interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're pay to play here too, right? We're just paying the government at least. They're talking about making coyotes a game animal in Washington State right now.
Yeah.
But, we're not heading towards a place where there's more hunting opportunity in North America. What we're heading towards is where there's less hunting opportunity, where it's more expensive. The price of preference points in Wyoming just went to $75.
Yeah.
It's not getting less expensive and more accessible in North America.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that you kind of touching on, James, is they're supply driven. You know what I mean? Like they are into producing hunting opportunity, And if they end up with an abundance, they'll just kill them and they'll sell the meat. You know what I mean? So there's not this idea. There's much more of supply oriented side of things. And honestly, man, again, I don't want to speak out of my place, but I think that's also why the South Africans in particular are so competitive with each other.
Mm.
Not in a negative way, just as a hunting market, those guys are very competitive. Because they have the availability to provide more hunting opportunity if the demand is there. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. It's just so different than our system.
Yeah. Well, that competition is good for the marketplace with anything. And when we see companies that move towards having monopolies on things, then it tends to not be good. And the consumer is for sure the biggest loser in that. So yeah, I think it's competitive and it's a healthy competition, and a lot of places have probably a similar experience to offer. So they've got to try to do what they can to either make their prices more reasonable or increase the quality of the experience, and that competition is very healthy, and we as hunters are big beneficiaries of that. Cliff, I've got to ask, at this stage of your life and in your career, what was the thing that finally tripped you into making the decision to go ahead and give African hunting a try?
Man, I think for me, James, it's always been the time commitment. It has to be a long, like somewhat of a long trip due to the travel, and so it in some ways it hit where I had the opportunity to take the time. I had a block that I was invited to, like, oh yeah, I can make those dates work. So that was part of it. The other part of it was I could have made excuses because of the time commitment. And I think that's what gets most people on it, because it's not the money. I mean, look, it's the when you add up everything, it's not like it's going to be super cheap to go there, but relative to what hunting prices are here in the US for what you get, it's very cheap, right? So it's not the money that stops people. I think a lot of it has to do with the idea of just the commitment to the time, right? You got to go for 2 weeks. And so for me, it was just finally getting over that and being like, I gotta go. And the other thing is, James, is the influence of people around me. You've always been a huge proponent of it. Aaron at Gunworks has been a big proponent of it. Like a lot of guys that I know have hunted a lot of places are like, you should go. And I'm kind of one of those guys now. Like, I've hunted a shitload of places, and one of the first places I would say is like best bang for your buck. Africa is like killer. I have some thoughts. I have some thoughts about a North American hunter going to Africa and then extrapolating his experience there to North America. Like, that may be a challenge. Like, I guess I would simplify it as, I don't know if it's a great for somebody who is most likely going to have only North American hunting opportunities in their hunting career. I'm not sure that going to Africa as their first hunt's a good idea. I think it would make them frustrated with our hunting here. It's almost like, maybe this is a little self-serving to say this, James, and I'd love to hear your perspective on it. I can come back here. I just went into the Frank Church and went bear hunting. It's a totally different thing. You got to work 3 or 4 days just to find a bear, that sort of stuff. I'm okay doing that, because to me it's just a different thing, right? I'm there for a different thing than I was in Africa, or it's just, and that's not just killing stuff. It's just a different adventure. So to me, it's a different thing. But if I got where I was only, I started with African hunting, I may go into the mountains and be like, I'm never doing that again. I'm just going to hunt Africa forever. I don't know. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it does. Uh, when I got to Tanzania for the first time, I was in Dar es Salaam, spent the night, PH showed up the next day, and he looked at me. I was, fresh out of the Marine Corps, and he asked me how old I was, and he said, "You're too young. This is going to ruin your entire life. Just stay here in town, chase girls, eat seafood. Don't go do this hunt."
Yeah.
And he was mostly joking, but he was also right. Because having an experience like that, if you're not able to categorize it and put it into a separate folder and be like, no, this is a different thing, right? I can't take this expectation of this experience and then apply it to elk or mule deer or bear or whatever hunting back home, because there is an opportunity for frustration there if you decide to do that. But it is otherworldly, and it's just so special and interesting. Isn't it fascinating? This is something that always strikes me when I'm there, is you've got the same landscape, the same terrain, the same vegetation, and you have all these species who look wildly different from each other that are coexisting in that habitat. Isn't that fascinating?
Dude, it's wild. And also their behavior. Like, one thing about the place we were hunting, James, is it hadn't been hunted very much. So the animals were, I mean, they do some game management, but my understanding is, like, I mean, we're talking 99% of them are born there. It's not like they're stalking the place or whatever. But so they were still wild. But what was interesting is my hunting impact over 2 weeks. You could notice it. You know what I mean? Like, they were, so I think there's a variation there, but the reason I brought that up is just the behavioral difference between them, man. Like, some of them are much flightier than others, and it's kind of wild that way. But there is this, I think Chris was telling me, I think they have like 25 or 26 different species on the place. And some of them are not endemic to that area, which, again, is kind of wild, because I wouldn't know that,
Right.
like I wouldn't have known, which were endemic or not. And then the wildest thing was, so this property had changed ownership like 3 or 4 years ago, and it had been owned by a family for, I think, 100+ years, who had like a ton of history in the area. And so I was in the lodge, and I was looking through their old books, like their old, like pricing sheets and that sort of thing, from like the 80s and 90s, and or even like earlier. And all those animals were there. Like, they had the red lechwe. I shot a fallow deer. To me, that was mind-boggling. I almost felt weird about it, James, because I was like, I came all the way to Africa and shot a fallow deer. And then I got to talking to Chris about it, and he's like, dude, fallow deer have been here for like 400 years. I'm like, really? They came with the original, a lot of the settlers that came down there. So it's just very interesting that way,
Yeah.
But even their coloration is kind of weird, right, James? Like, you can have like red hartebeest, which to me are kind of like they follow the pattern that our species do, right? White, light belly, light rump kind of thing, that we see a lot in North America. And then 50 yards away, there's 80 zebras. You're like, what? Like, how is that? Like, how does that work, right? You guys are following like a different strategy here, So it's
Totally.
it's interesting.
I mean, you might look at a hillside, and you've got a giraffe, an ostrich, wildebeest, impala, kudu. These animals that look so wildly different, who are totally different body shapes, and they're all existing in this same environment. Whereas if you go around, the Intermountain West, you might look at a hillside and be like, that's a good spot for a bear.
Yeah.
Or this is good elk country, or this is good mule deer country, or this is good whitetail country. And if you see some type of interchange between some of those species in those places, you might be like, well, that's an odd place for a whitetail.
Sure.
And that occurs in South Africa to an extent too. You might get into a real brushy spot and be like, oh, this is a good place to find bushbuck or whatever.
Right.
There's going to be some nyala in here. But yeah, it is mind blowing to me to see just how physically different all of those animals are within the same space.
Oh
And
yeah.
and I treasure the experience of getting to be there and see it.
Yeah, just see all the different animals. I think that's an underrated component of it because it kind of seems it seems like a petty thing, right? Oh, it's just like about a lot of animals. It's like, no, yeah, it is about seeing all the animals. It's pretty cool to see 25 different species. And the thing is, it's not just that there's a bigger assortment of game animals there. It's kind of, what you're alluding to there, James. I mean, three of our big game animals, white-tailed deer, mule deer, and elk even, by Africa standards, they're kind of all the same. If because they like if you like their relative differences, between if you take that between a zebra and a wildebeest, like it's miles apart, right?
Right.
So it's not just that there's more of them; it's that they're just so different and their behavior. I mean, I got the biggest kick out of the springbuck. I mean, I had seen them, James, but it wasn't something that I really was like. It was even on my thought process of hunting, but seeing those little guys, like one, like how fast they could run, but their random like 10-foot hop,
Yeah.
it's just cool, you
Yeah.
know. So it was the assortment of species is an amazing plus, you know.
One thing that I would tell people that I think a lot of folks are going to have a really hard time hearing, you don't have to get taxidermy.
Yeah.
That is optional. So if one of your hangups for the expense of going to Africa is, okay, I've got, this price for the hunt, this price for the species, this price for travel, but now I need to consider, the cost of taxidermy and shipping for all this stuff to get it back. You don't have to do that.
Right.
Like that stuff will all go to a good home if you leave it there, and you can dramatically decrease the expense of your trip by doing so, and come back with photographs and memories.
Yeah.
That's something that you can do.
Yeah, and it's funny you said, James, because I for sure really limited how much taxidermy that I'm doing. I'm not doing a single shoulder mount, even with the Cape Buffalo. It just doesn't make sense for me personally. But it's hard. It's kind of weird, like it's a weird psychology, right? You almost feel obligated to do it, and then you realize that there is no obligation. I don't know like the internal economics of that, but I don't even know that the businesses care that much, right?
No, no. Yeah.
So I don't think it's that big of a deal, and I don't think outside of maybe some specific skulls or something in the future, and this maybe alludes to the previous topic we were talking about. For me personally, James, I will admit to the fact that even though I said that I can appreciate all the different types of hunting, any money that I spend on hunts in the future, the vast majority of it will not be in the U.S. It'll probably be in Africa. If I could like speculate on my future. And
Absolutely.
yeah. So when I think about the taxidermy going forward, I don't think that I'll do very much of it at all. And
Yep.
I think I've gotten over that obstacle in my mind. This is something that is interesting, and I'll speak about it publicly because it was something that I questioned. I questioned the meat thing. Like personally, and that comes from a place that, there are different types of hunting and different things I've seen over my years, internationally in Canada and other places where they say everything gets eaten, but it doesn't all get eaten. Right. So I went into Africa being like, okay, like your guys' PR, but I kind of want to personally at least figure out what the reality is. Man, in my experience, it gets eaten. Like there was nothing that didn't get eaten there, and that is not bullshit. You know what I mean? And so that was something interesting from my perspective. Even some of the species that I thought, I kind of wonder, what they do with a big Cape buffalo. Do they actually use it all? Yeah, they use it all, or they sell it. which again, it kind of comes back to this other component of it. Dude, I have real mixed feelings about that, James. Like I have mixed feelings about, I sound like I'm like bastard, being a bastard about this, but if I have to be honest, that I have mixed feelings about our market hunting rules, because I'm not saying they're wrong, but I'm saying is you look at this alternative system and it's like, well, they can sell the meat, which gives them an outlet. You know what I mean? I don't know if you ever thought it when we were there, but I thought it was cool. I thought, okay, this is cool. Like clearly due to customs, I can't take all this meat back, and nor would it be practical, but I know it's all being used. Their crew eats some, they give some away locally, but they sell a lot of it. And to me, that's awesome. Like it's kind of cool, you know? So I don't know if you had thoughts on that part of it.
I agree with you. And if you think that meat is going to waste in Africa, you've never been there, and that's just the reality of it. It also falls under this like charismatic megafauna thing that we're constantly battling in the socio-biological sphere of North America. If you go on a fishing trip and the charter keeps that fish and sells it, nobody has any heartburn about that because fish don't have souls. But if I were to do that with elk, that would be illegal,
right?
Like deeply illegal. And it's crazy to me. I can donate wild game to some places, but I can't donate it to others. Right. And that's also very, very odd to me. This is really healthy food. This is good food. And especially in places where you have a big surplus of game animals that are causing a lot of damage, and the solution is to reduce that population, why can't we commercially sell that?
Yeah.
And do it correctly? Like we've figured out ways to do it with axis deer in Hawaii. There's excellent models that New Zealand is using for wild game harvest, and nobody's getting sick, right? This is sustainable. I don't want to see market hunting be where it was in 1900, where we're, burning these species to the ground. But I do think that there's absolutely a place for selling wild game that is legally harvested in the United States. And, does that lead to poaching when you monetize something like that? I don't know. I think that fear of, well, if we allow this, then people will do it illegally. That has just never held water with me.
Yeah,
I think
you could use the same argument for hunting. Why do we have hunting? People could do it illegally. You know what I mean? So
it doesn't make a lot of sense. But So what would be? I've so enjoyed this conversation. This is the most frank conversation I've ever had about hunting in Africa. And I think for the listeners, it's going to be the most frank and honest conversation that they've probably ever heard about hunting in Africa.
Sure.
What would be some closing comments or advice that you have for that hunter, regardless of where they are in the world, who's just curious and potentially interested in taking that step and going and doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing, I'd just be very clear about it. I wouldn't worry about the high fence thing outside of maybe screening where you go. I don't have the depth of knowledge. I've heard stories about small places that for sure have a different vibe. My experience hunting with Chris, the high fence deal was irrelevant, right? So that I would put aside and not worry about so much, because I know that's a hang up for people. The other part of it, I think, honestly, James, is look, our experiences are about money to some extent. So if you're struggling with a lot of, I've seen it. I'm in the business, right? And so are you, James. Hunts have skyrocketed in the last 10 years in North America. I'm sure they've even beat inflation. But the other component of it is they're just a giant pain in the ass. Like you can't even decide when you're hunting now, which I'm not trying to be a whiner. We are gifted with amazing things here. But I would consider that when you're thinking about going to Africa. Like, look, you can get this on the books 2 years from now and figure out how to, figure out how to pay for it. I don't see any reason why somebody shouldn't view it that way. Other than that, I don't have a whole lot to say. It's opened up a lot of thoughts for adventures to me. Now I'm kind of like you, James. The last thing I needed is like more bucket list items, But we could talk about that in the future. Like the Cape Buffalo thing was absolutely like a totally different type of hunting, tracking animals that way. It was all it was cracked up to be, which is kind of amazing given like the bias I came into with it. Like I've been a fan of all the books and Hemingway and Capstick and all that stuff. So how could it not be overrated? And it wasn't overrated. You know what I mean? And it brought in like another, that was a little bit of even for me, James, I don't think that 5 years ago that shooting a Cape Buffalo would have been on the list. Like I had the same bias, like double rifle, super rich guy shooting a buffalo and acting like it's dangerous, right? That's kind of the image I had. And I don't care if people want to do that, but doing it opened my mind up to like, oh no, like I could be that guy. Like if I had a ton of money right now, I'm pretty sure I would blow it on going and hunting Cape Buffalo for 6 months. You know what I mean? Like, and so that like you start to realize these things. And it's like never ending. So those are my thoughts on it, man.
Yeah, those are good thoughts. I'll close it out with one thing. What we've experienced in a lot of places for hunting in the West is point creep, where it takes more points to draw a hunt this year than it did last year. And it feels like you can never really catch up. Now, the way point creep always ends up is in a situation where only old people can draw that tag because it's taken 26, 29, right, 30 years to draw that hunt. And now you're maybe too physically old to be able to go and do the thing that you started to try to get decades earlier. This year, I've had more calls from people who are in that exact situation than ever before, where they're like, hey, I've got 26 points. I'm probably going to draw this tag, but I can't do it on my own, and all my buddies are dead.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart. And that is the situation that is really starting to occur at a high rate, and it's only going to increase. It is only going to increase. Please do not participate in this system that is getting worse. That's right. What I would encourage people to do. And the best way to continue hunting and not participate in this bad situation is to go hunt someplace else. And Africa is a dandy opportunity.
No, I totally agree. And I love hunting the West, but it's an opportunity that I don't see why a guy would pass up.
Yeah. Cool. All right, man. Where can people follow along in all of your beautiful and valuable content if they're not already following you?
Yeah, man. So just Cliff Gray on YouTube. Pretty easy to just hit it in the search bar. And then all my other stuff is on my website, pursuitwithcliff.com. That's the best.
Any other announcements coming up? You're helping out with a hunting school. Is that all booked out?
Yeah, it's all booked this year, but if people want to see details, they can go to the website. I've got a bunch of different classes I'm doing in Wyoming. Really enjoy doing it. We continue to develop it. It's kind of amazing how much people get out of it. So yeah, if people want details on that, they can check it out on the website. I'll have open spots back up probably sometime around the holidays.
Okay, excellent. All right, brother. Well, appreciate you a lot. And folks, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I hope you go and follow Cliff. His YouTube is really tremendous. He actually provides value and is going to make you a better hunter and show you ways to enjoy it more. And it's for free. So go check it out.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Bye, everybody. Thank you to everyone who has taken the time out of their busy lives to write a review for the show and share it with their friends. I'm extremely proud of how intelligent, engaged, and adventurous this audience is. Original music for the Six Ranch podcast is written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the Six Ranch podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Harlander. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.